In this video, we'll explore why column subtraction starts to fall apart if your larger number is on the bottom. So here would be an example where you might want to set it up that way. Let's say we're doing 28 minus 34. We've been talking about changing that to addition, which tells us to subtract, but to put the 34 on top. So why can't we put the 28 on top? Why do we have to kind of think of it as addition and rearrange it? So let's see what happens if we're thinking of this in normal column subtraction. If I was doing normal column subtraction, I would do 8 minus 4. You're kind of breaking these up into two separate problems. So 8 minus 4 would give me 4. And then maybe I'd want to think of 2 minus 3 as like a negative 1. Right? 2 minus 3, I'm taking more away than I started with. So maybe I would get negative 14 as my answer. If I do it the other way, I have 4 minus 8, which would make me have to borrow. So then I'd be doing 14 minus 8, which is 6. And then 2 minus 2 would be 0. And in this method, if I'm using this, I'm taught to look at what more signs I have. So like I have more negatives. So my answer would be a negative 6. Now, in math, it's normally not a good thing if I get two different answers. So we need to figure out what's going on here and why both of these aren't getting me the same answer. Let's look at an example that has 3 columns. So same thing, I'm doing 134 plus a negative 214. We're taught to flip the subtraction around and put the 214 on top. So if I put the 214 on top and I'm going through my column subtraction, I would get 0 here, have to borrow here, and I would get 80. Looking at the sign of my answer, I'd want to make it negative since I have more negatives. On the other side, if I weren't to flip it and I kept the smaller number, the first number on top, 4 minus 4 would be 0, 3 minus 1 would be 2, and then I can think of 1 minus 2 as negative 1. Again, not a good thing in math if I'm getting two different answers. So let's take a look at how column subtraction works and why one of these is not quite right. So we'll look at a normal problem of 468 minus 222. So no like negatives, nothing crazy like that. If I were subtracting these in columns, I would get 6, 4, and 2. Okay, here's what's happening in column subtraction. You are essentially breaking these up into 3 separate problems. So that first column relates to 400 minus 200. Then I would have 60 minus 20 and 8 minus 2. So 400 minus 200 gives me 200. 60 minus 20 gives me 40. And 8 minus 2 gives me 6. Your answer comes from adding those 3 things together. So when they're all positive, that's why column subtraction works. I'm adding them together. So let's go back to those first couple and see what's happening behind the scenes here and why the answer isn't always adding up. So here's the very first one we looked at. It was originally 28 minus 34. And if we set it up that way, we would get negative 14. If we flipped it around, we would get negative 6. So looking at this first one, my 2 columns would be 20 minus 30. And then 8 minus 4. So 20 minus 30 would be a negative 10. 8 minus 4 would be 4. Remember, column subtraction is adding together those 2 things. So negative 10 plus 4 is not negative 14. Negative 10 plus 4 is negative 6, which matches what we get when we flip it around to have the bigger number on top. So this difference between negatives and positives here and adding them together is why column subtraction does not work when the smaller number's on top. So if we're going into subtraction and you're trying to get the answer, you have to flip those numbers around and put the bigger number on top. Let's explore it with the 3-digit number as well. So same thing with the 3-digit. We're going to break this up. Here's kind of the one in question with that smaller number on top. So my columns would be 100 minus 200 30 minus 10, and 4 minus 4. So 4 minus 4 gives me 0, 30 minus 10 gets me 20, but 100 minus 200 gets me negative 100. And when I add those together, it does not equal negative 120 because those are different signs. Negative 100 plus 20 plus 0 technically is equal to this negative 180. Those two combine to a negative 80. So column subtraction again does not work when the smaller number's on top because the addition kind of falls apart with negatives and positives. So the moral of the story, if you're setting up column subtraction, you need to put the bigger number on top. It does not work when the bigger number's on the bottom because of the way it's adding together the answers to the columns. So use this and what you know about positives and negatives to help you with the signs of your final answer. But if you're doing the actual math, bigger number goes on top.